The convoy was supposed to be routine. The kind where the road stretched into an endless ribbon of dust and heat, engines humming in rhythm, soldiers shifting uncomfortably in their armored seats while trying not to think too much about how exposed they really were. Private First Class Riley Torres sat wedged against the window of the MRAP, his M4 across his lap, sweat dripping down the back of his neck. He was new enough to still feel the itch of anticipation before each mission, but old enough, 3 months in country, to know the itch came with teeth. "Eyes open," Sergeant Brooks said from the turret, his voice muffled through the headset but sharp with authority. "This road's been too quiet lately." That comment hung in the air heavier than the dust. Quiet in Afghanistan didn't mean safe. Quiet meant waiting. Riley shifted, glanced at Corporal Hayes across from him, who gave him a quick smirk that said, "Relax, kid, don't think yourself into a panic." Then it happened. The blast tore through the second vehicle of the convoy, fire and dirt exploding upward like the earth itself had vomited. The sound slammed Riley's eardrums, made his chest feel like it caved in. Screams followed. Metal screeched. The convoy ground to a halt. "ID. ID. Get out, get out." The orders snapped Riley into motion before his brain could catch up. He shoved open the heavy door, boots hitting dirt as adrenaline surged. His rifle was up, finger brushing the trigger guard, scanning the ridgelines and crumbling mud compounds for muzzle flashes. The smoke from the burning vehicle stung his eyes, and through the haze he saw a figure crawling out of the wreckage, uniform shredded, helmet gone. "Medic! We need a medic now," someone shouted. Enemy fire cracked from the hills. The sound of rounds zipping past them was unmistakable, snapping the air like angry hornets. Riley dove behind the wheel well, heart hammering in his throat. He peeked out, saw Brooks swiveling the turret, returning fire in controlled bursts. "Torres!" Hayes barked, dropping beside him. "Cover me. We're pulling him out." Riley didn't think. He leaned out, fired controlled bursts toward the ridge where muzzle flashes flared. Hayes sprinted into the smoke, dragging the wounded man by his vest. Another soldier joined in, both hauling him toward cover. A round sparked off the metal just inches from Riley's head, and he flinched, teeth clenched, before sending another 3-round burst toward the ridge. Minutes stretched into forever. The firefight raged. Dust, smoke, and the sharp stink of explosives mixed with sweat and fear. Riley fired, reloaded, fired again, his ears ringing from the noise. Finally, the crack of enemy rifles began to fade. The ridgeline went silent. Whoever had hit them was gone, melted back into the mountains. The soldiers regrouped, breaths ragged, faces smeared with soot and dirt. The medics worked frantically on the wounded, one of whom was unconscious and bleeding badly from shrapnel embedded deep in his thigh. Riley stood, trembling hands reloading a fresh magazine though no one was shooting anymore. Brooks climbed down from the turret, his face grim. "That wasn't random. They knew we'd be on this road today." Riley swallowed hard. His throat was raw. He looked back at the destroyed vehicle, flames still licking at its twisted metal. 3 soldiers had been in there. Only one had been dragged out alive. The others, gone in an instant. The reality settled heavy in his chest. Just like that, 2 lives snuffed out, their gear and weapons scattered like discarded toys. There hadn't been time to even see who they were before they were gone. Riley hated himself for the thought, but part of him was relieved it hadn't been his vehicle. That guilt wrapped itself around his stomach like barbed wire. "Mount up," Brooks ordered. "We can't sit here waiting for round 2. They did as told, moving like shadows, silent but wired with nerves. Riley climbed back into the MRAP, the seatbelt buckle sticky with blood he didn't want to think about. The convoy pushed forward. The rest of the mission blurred together, every set of eyes scanning, every heart pounding at every bump in the road. By the time they rolled back through the gate of their forward operating base, the desert sun was dipping low, painting the world in orange fire. Inside the wire, the illusion of safety returned, but it felt thinner now. Riley stripped off his gear with shaking hands, collapsed onto his bunk and stared at the ceiling. Hayes dropped onto the bunk across from him, still sweating, face streaked with grime. "You did good out there, Torres," he said quietly. Riley didn't feel like he'd done good. He felt like he'd been lucky. Like he'd fired his weapon without even seeing who he was shooting at. Like he was one decision away from being the one dragged out of a burning vehicle. He sat up, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "They didn't even have a chance," he said softly. Hayes didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "Nobody ever does." The next morning, the platoon gathered in the briefing room. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of burnt coffee and fatigue. Captain Morales stood at the front, her expression hard as granite. Yesterday wasn't an accident, she said, scanning their faces. Intel suggests we've got a new cell operating in this sector. They're organized and they've got local support. Our job is to find them before they plant another roadside surprise. Her words landed like weights. Riley felt the unspoken truth pressing on all of them. This wasn't going to stop. The war wasn't waiting for them to catch their breath. Later, in the motor pool, Riley found himself paired with Specialist Dana Keene, a combat medic with sharp eyes and a dry wit that never seemed to fade, even in the worst moments. She was checking her gear, tightening straps, when Riley approached. "You good?" she asked without looking up. "I don't know," he admitted. She glanced at him then, studying him for a beat before nodding slowly. "That's the right answer. The day you stop asking yourself that, you're already halfway in the ground." Her words stuck with him. Riley watched her secure a med kit with hands steady from experience, scars peeking out from under her sleeve. Later, when another soldier made some offhand joke about medics never being in the thick of it, Keene just laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. Then she rolled up her sleeve to reveal the puckered lines of old shrapnel scars running down her forearm. The room went quiet. No one laughed after that. Riley stared, the truth sinking in deeper than any lecture or pep talk. Those scars weren't just flesh, they were proof. Proof that every decision mattered. Proof that war didn't care who you were or how prepared you thought you might be. That night, Riley lay awake on his cot, hearing echoes of the explosion in his skull. He thought of the two who hadn't made it, of the soldier with shrapnel in his thigh, of Keene's scars, of Hayes' flat voice saying nobody ever does. He wondered what decisions were waiting for him tomorrow. He wondered how many of them he would get right. The next mission was different. It wasn't convoy duty, wasn't about escorting supplies or maintaining a presence on the road. This one was about hunting. Riley sat in the briefing room with the rest of his platoon, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. The map on the projector showed a series of red circles along the valley, where yesterday's ambush had occurred. Captain Morales' voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Intel from locals and drone footage suggests a weapons cache in this area," she said, pointing at a cluster of compounds along the ridgeline. "We believe the same cell that hit you yesterday operates out of there. Your task is to move in, sweep, and clear. Search every building, every crawl space. If you take contact, engage. If you find the cache, you mark it and EOD handles the rest." Questions? No one spoke. Questions meant hesitation. Hesitation could look like weakness. Riley felt the weight of it anyway, the gnawing doubt in his stomach. He remembered Keene's scars, remembered the blast. Morales gave a curt nod. "Mount up. Wheels up in 10. They rolled out at dawn, dust trailing behind them wraps as the sun bled over the mountains. Riley sat beside Hayes again, both silent, rifles across their laps. The radio crackled occasionally with chatter, but otherwise it was the same tense quiet. Everyone was waiting. By the time they dismounted near the village, the heat was already suffocating. Sweat stung Riley's eyes as he adjusted his helmet, rifle at the ready. The villagers watched them with guarded expressions, some curious, some resentful. Children peeked from behind mud walls. Riley tried not to think about which of these faces might be smiling at them in daylight and passing coordinates to insurgents at night. "Spread out," Brooks ordered, his voice sharp. "Torres, you're with Keene. Hayes, you're with me." Riley fell in beside Keene as they moved into the first compound. The door creaked open, revealing a dim room filled with mats, blankets, and the faint smell of smoke. Keene motioned him forward, rifle up, scanning corners. His heart pounded, every shadow looking like it might lunge at him. "Clear?" he whispered. They moved deeper, sweeping each room. In one corner, Riley found a box of tools, nothing unusual. In another, just cooking pots. The monotony almost lulled him into thinking it was routine until Keene crouched near a trapdoor in the floor. She tapped it with her boot. "That doesn't belong." Riley's mouth went dry. He crouched beside her, hands slick on his rifle. Together, they pried the trapdoor open. Beneath, stacked in neat rows, were crates of ammunition, RPG rounds, and bundled wires. "Bingo," Keene muttered. She keyed her radio. "We've got eyes on the cache. Marking now." The platoon converged. Morales herself came to inspect, jaw tight as she looked at the stash. "EOD will neutralize. Hold perimeter until they arrive." That was when the first shot cracked. The bullet slammed into the wall inches from Riley's head, spraying dust. He hit the ground instinctively, rolling to cover. Shouts erupted. Gunfire poured in from the ridge line above the village. "Contact. North Ridge." Brooks bellowed. The air exploded into chaos. Riley pressed his cheek to his rifle stock, scanning for targets. He saw figures darting between rocks, muzzle flashes lighting the hillside. He fired, felt the recoil slam his shoulder, but couldn't tell if he'd hit anything. Keen dropped beside him, calmly laying down suppressive fire between bursts. "They want their toys back," she shouted over the din. Another round smacked into the wall, sending a spray of mud into Riley's face. He coughed, adjusted, fired again. Hayes' voice crackled over the radio, strained and urgent. "They're trying to flank from the west." "Torres Keen on me," Brooks barked. They sprinted through the narrow alleys, boots pounding, hearts racing. The sounds of battle bounced off the walls, echoing in the confined spaces. Riley's lungs burned, sweat pouring down his back. They reached the western edge just as 3 insurgents darted between low walls, rifles spitting fire. Brooks dropped one instantly with a clean shot. Riley fired at the second, missed, adjusted, fired again. This time the figure crumpled, sliding into the dust. The third disappeared behind cover. "Push forward," Brooks ordered. Riley obeyed, feet moving before his brain caught up. He rounded the corner, only to find himself face to face with the third insurgent, rifle raised. Time slowed. Riley's breath froze in his chest. The man's eyes were wide, his weapon jerking upward. Riley squeezed the trigger first. The crack was deafening up close. The insurgent collapsed, rifle clattering to the ground. Riley stood over the body, chest heaving, ears ringing. He'd pulled the trigger in time, but the image seared itself into his mind. The man's face, the surprise, the final collapse. He didn't feel triumph. He felt a hollow pit opening inside him. "Torres!" Brooks' shout snapped him back. "Move!" They pressed on, clearing the flank, gunfire still echoing from the ridge. Mortar rounds thumped in the distance as support fire rained down, shaking the ground. Eventually the insurgents broke, fading back into the mountains as suddenly as they'd appeared. The silence afterward was deafening. Only the smell of gunpowder lingered, acrid and heavy. Back at the compound, the EOD team moved in, setting charges to destroy the cache. The soldiers pulled security, nerves raw. Riley sat on a broken wall, rifle across his knees, staring at his hands. They were trembling. Keen dropped beside him, sweat dripping from her temple. She lit a cigarette, offered one to him. He shook his head. "You did what you had to," she said simply. Riley didn't answer. His ears still rang with the shot, his eyes still saw the man's face. When the charges detonated, the blast shook the ground, sending smoke and fire into the sky. The cache was gone, but the war wasn't. It was never that simple. That night, back at the FOB, the platoon gathered in the chow hall. The noise was loud, laughter forced, everyone talking a little too quickly, a little too loudly. The way people did when they'd brushed too close to death and wanted to prove they were still alive. Riley sat quietly, pushing food around his tray. Hayes slid in beside him, grinning faintly. "First confirmed kill, huh?" Hayes said. "Welcome to the club." Riley's stomach twisted. He didn't want to be in that club. Keen walked by, overhearing. She smirked at Hayes, then looked at Riley. "Ignore him. Nobody joins that club willingly. We just get drafted." Her words carried more weight than the joke. Riley gave her a weak nod. Later, lying in his bunk, he stared at the ceiling again, thoughts spinning. He wondered if the man he'd shot had a family. If he'd been fighting for money, for ideology, or just because he'd been born in the wrong place at the wrong time. The war didn't give answers. It only gave consequences. 2 days later, Morales called them back in. The cell wasn't done. Drone footage showed movement farther up the valley, new positions, new activity. The fight wasn't over. "We hurt them," Morales said. "Now they'll try to hurt us back. We're going after them before they can regroup." The room was silent. Riley felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. Another mission. Another decision. Another roll of the dice with lives on the table. He thought of the blast, of the firefight, of the face of the man he'd shot. He thought of Keen's scars. The war was changing him. He just didn't know yet into what. The valley stretched before them like a scar. Riley stared out the gunport of the MRAP as the convoy rumbled deeper into hostile territory. The mountains loomed on either side, jagged teeth against the horizon. Dust trailed behind the vehicles, hanging in the air like smoke. The hum of the engine was steady, but beneath it was that silence soldiers knew too well. Waiting silence, the kind that always ended with fire. Sergeant Brooks' voice cut over the intercom. "This is payback country now. Eyes open. They're expecting us." No one replied. The only sounds were the rattling of gear and the occasional click of someone checking their weapon again. Riley's rifle rested across his knees, his thumb brushing the safety switch over and over. His heart thudded steady and loud. They reached the dismount point near a dried riverbed. Boots hit dirt, the weight of body armor settling heavy across their shoulders. Captain Morales moved at the front, her gaze sharp as she surveyed the terrain. "Listen up," she said, her voice low but firm. "The insurgents are dug in up there." She pointed to a series of caves pockmarked along the ridgeline. "Intel says they're using it as a base. We're sweeping and clearing. No half measures. Once we move fast and hard. Got it?" A chorus of Roger's answered. Riley swallowed, throat dry as sand. He fell in behind Hayes and Keene as the platoon advanced. The sun beat down, the air thin and hot. Every step crunched on gravel, loud in his ears. They reached the mouth of the first cave. Brooks raised a fist, signaling a halt. He motioned Riley and Keene forward. Riley's stomach clenched. He moved anyway, rifle up, finger tight on the trigger. Keene was beside him, calm, steady, like she'd done this 100 times. They stepped into the darkness. The cave was cool, damp, shadows twisting across the walls. Riley's light cut a beam through the gloom. His pulse hammered. A shape moved. "Down?" Keene barked. The gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Riley dropped, firing instinctively, muzzle flashes lighting the cave like lightning. The insurgent collapsed, weapon clattering. Riley's ears rang, lungs heaving. Keene crouched beside the body, checking for movement. Nothing. She gave a curt nod. "Clear." They pressed deeper, clearing alcoves, every corner a potential ambush. Riley's hands ached from gripping the rifle so tightly. When they emerged back into sunlight, sweat streaked his face, but the cave was theirs. "First one down," Brooks said. "Plenty more to go." The climb toward the next cave was brutal, rocks sliding under their boots, the air thin. Gunfire cracked suddenly from above. Bullets sparked against stone, sending shards flying. The platoon dove for cover. "Contact!" someone shouted. The hillside came alive with fire. Muzzle flashes flickered in the rocks. Riley pressed flat against the ground, dirt in his teeth, ears ringing with the sound of rounds whizzing past. Hayes swore beside him, returning fire. "Torres, suppress that nest," Brooks yelled. Riley popped up, sighted on the ridge, and fired controlled bursts. Dust sprayed near the muzzle flashes. He ducked again, heart hammering. Mortar fire answered, thumping nearby, showering them with dirt. The ground shook. Riley's gut clenched. This was worse than before, coordinated, heavier. Morales' voice cut sharp through the chaos. "Push left. Flank them out." They moved, bounding from rock to rock, gunfire snapping overhead. Riley's legs burned, lungs on fire, but he followed Hayes and Keene, firing when he could. They reached a boulder near the enemy position. Brooks signaled. "Grenades." Hayes pulled the pin, lobbed it high. The blast rocked the hillside, smoke and dust erupting. Morales shouted, "Go!" They surged forward, rifles blazing. Riley's vision tunneled. He fired, moved, fired again. Figures scrambled in the smoke, shouting in another language. One dropped, another fled. The ridge fell silent except for the ringing in his ears. When it was over, Riley stood panting, sweat dripping, rifle trembling in his grip. The hillside was theirs. Bodies littered the rocks, weapons scattered. Keene clapped his shoulder, steadying him. "Still with me?" "Yeah," Riley managed, though his stomach churned. They cleared 2 more caves, finding more weapons, more ammo. Each step deeper into the valley felt like walking into a trap, but they kept moving, relentless. By late afternoon, the sun was a molten weight on their backs. The platoon regrouped near a rocky outcrop, taking swigs of warm water, breaths ragged. Morales crouched over the map, frowning. "There's one more cave. Bigger. Intel says it's their command post." Riley wiped sweat from his eyes. His body ached, mind fraying at the edges, but he knew they weren't done. The approach was quiet. Too quiet. Riley's nerves screamed. He scanned every shadow, every rock. The cave mouth yawned wide, dark and waiting. Brooks motioned them forward. Riley's throat tightened, but he moved. Inside, the air was cool, the darkness thick. Their lights swept across crates of weapons, stacks of explosives. It was a gold mine of insurgent supplies. Then the trap sprung. Gunfire erupted from hidden alcoves. Bullets sparked off stone. Riley dove behind a crate, ears ringing. Shouts echoed, the cave filling with chaos. "Ambush!" Brooks roared. Riley returned fire blindly, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness. Figures darted in and out of shadows. The sound was deafening, gunfire bouncing off the walls like thunder. Hayes cursed, clutching his arm as blood seeped through his sleeve. Keene was already on him, dragging him behind cover, hands steady even as bullets chewed the air around them. Riley leaned out, sighted, fired. One insurgent fell. Another kept coming. The cave was a storm of sound and smoke. Morales' voice cut through. Hold them. We've got to collapse this place. Charges. That was the plan. Destroy the cache, deny the enemy their stronghold. Brooks tossed Riley a satchel. Set it. I'll cover you. Riley's stomach dropped, but he nodded. He sprinted low, weaving between cover, round smacking stone inches away. He reached the far wall, slapped the charges in place, hands shaking, then sprinted back. Set, he gasped. Fall back. Morales ordered. They retreated under fire, dragging Hayes, Keene firing bursts to cover them. Riley's legs burned, lungs screaming, but he didn't stop. They burst into daylight, stumbling into the open. Morales hit the detonator. The cave erupted. Fire and smoke roared outward, the ground shaking. Rocks tumbled, dust engulfed them. The entrance collapsed in a thunder of stone. Silence followed, broken only by coughing and the crackle of settling rubble. They destroyed the command post. But not without cost. Hayes lay pale, blood soaking his sleeve. Keene worked furiously, hands steady, voice calm. Stay with me, Hayes. You're not going anywhere. Riley knelt beside them, rifle still clutched, chest heaving. His hands shook uncontrollably. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only exhaustion and the weight of everything they'd done. When the medevac bird finally came, kicking up dust as it landed, Riley helped load Hayes onto the stretcher. The rotor wash blasted hot air against his face, stinging his eyes. He watched as the bird lifted, carrying Hayes away. The valley was quiet again. Too quiet. As they regrouped for exfil, Riley felt the silence press against him like a weight. They'd won today, but it didn't feel like victory. The war wasn't ending. The valley wasn't safe. The enemy wasn't gone. Riley looked at his trembling hands, then at Keene, who was lighting another cigarette with the same calm she always had. Still think you're good? She asked. Riley swallowed hard, searching for words. Finally he shook his head. No. Keene blew smoke into the hot wind. Good. Means you're still human. The convoy rolled back toward base, the sun sinking low behind them, shadows stretching long across the valley. Riley sat in silence, rifle across his knees, mind replaying every decision, every shot, every scream. The war was changing him. Each day carving something new into him, something deeper, something he wasn't sure he wanted to see. And the valley wasn't done with them yet. The FOB never really slept, but that night it felt hollow. Riley lay on his cot, the hum of generators thrumming through the walls, distant voices murmuring in the motor pool. He stared at the ceiling, images from the valley looping behind his eyes, the insurgent's face in the cave, Hayes bleeding out, the explosion as the mountain swallowed the command post. Sleep didn't come. His body was exhausted, every muscle aching, but his mind refused to shut down. When morning came, the desert sun blazing over the HESCO barriers, he sat in the chow hall picking at powdered eggs. Keene slid in across from him, tray clattering. She didn't say anything at first, just ate, her movements calm and deliberate. You look like hell, she finally said. Thanks, Riley muttered. She smirked, but her eyes softened slightly. Hayes made it through surgery. Word is he'll be evac to Germany. He'll bitch about the food there too. Relief hit Riley harder than he expected. He'd been carrying Hayes' pale face with him all night. Before he could respond, Captain Morales strode in. Her presence cut the room like a blade, every soldier instinctively straightening. She didn't waste time. Listen up, she said loud enough for every table. Yesterday we crippled their command post. That means they're angry. And desperate. They'll hit us back and hard. I want every squad tightened up, every patrol sharp. No routine. Change your routes. Expect the unexpected. She paused, her gaze sweeping across them. This isn't about surviving the next ambush. This is about outthinking them. We take the initiative or we bleed. The silence that followed was thick. Riley's stomach tightened. The thought of another mission so soon made his chest heavy, but there was no room for hesitation. Orders were orders. By afternoon, Riley's squad was rolling out again. This time on foot, patrolling the outskirts of the valley village where they'd found the weapons cache. The sun was merciless, heat radiating off the dirt like an oven. Sweat soaked through his body armor, stinging his eyes. Bet you $5 tourist trips first, one soldier muttered over comms. Riley shot back. Bet you 5 I don't. Laughter crackled across the net, quick and sharp. Even Brooks chuckled. Humor wasn't weakness, it was armor. They moved cautiously, eyes scanning rooftops, alleys and windows. Kids watched them from doorways, their expressions unreadable. An old man shuffled past with a donkey, giving them a glance that lingered too long. Riley's nerves prickled. They reached the market square, a cluster of stalls with tarps flapping in the wind. The place felt wrong. Too still. Brooks raised a hand. Halt. Riley froze, rifle up, scanning. His breath slowed, ears straining. That was when he heard it, a faint click underfoot. His blood turned to ice. "Don't move," Keene whispered, eyes locking on his boots. Riley looked down. Half buried in the dirt was a pressure plate, crude wires running into the shadows beneath the stall. Every nerve in his body screamed. Sweat poured down his back, but he didn't dare shift his weight. One wrong move and he'd be in pieces. "Talk to me," he said, voice tight. Keene crouched, eyes sharp, hands steady. Old Soviet plate, wired sloppy. "But live. You lift your foot, it pops." His throat was sandpaper. "Options." She smirked faintly, though her voice was serious. "You stand there till I figure it out. Don't get twitchy." Brooks barked into the radio for EOD, but everyone knew they were too far out for quick help. It was on them. Keene worked quickly, tracing wires with steady fingers. Riley's legs trembled, not from weakness but from holding still under crushing fear. The market around them was silent now. Villagers had slipped away, vanishing like smoke. "They're watching," Brooks muttered. "Waiting to see if it works." The thought made Riley's skin crawl. Somewhere, eyes were on him, waiting for him to make one wrong move. Minutes dragged like hours. Finally, Keene cut a wire, then another. She looked up, met his eyes. "Okay. Step back. Slow." His muscles screamed as he shifted weight. For a second, time froze, then his boot lifted free, the ground staying silent beneath it. No explosion. He exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The squad clapped his back, muttered relief, tension breaking like a snapped cord. "See," Keene said dryly. "Didn't even die. You owe me a beer." The humor cut through the fear, but only for a moment. That night, back at the FOB, Morales debriefed them. The IED wasn't random. They wanted a show. "They're probing us. Testing reactions. Next time it won't be a pressure plate, it'll be an ambush stacked on top." She was right. The insurgents didn't wait long. 2 days later, on a dusk patrol near the valley, the squad was moving through a narrow pass when gunfire exploded from both ridges. Contact both sides. Brooks roared. Bullets poured down, sparking off rocks, dirt spraying. Riley dove for cover, returning fire blindly. The pass became a kill box. Mortars thumped, explosions echoing. Shrapnel sliced the air. Riley's ears rang, vision blurring. "We're pinned," someone shouted. Morales' voice was iron over the net. "Hold. Break right on my mark." Riley's chest heaved, adrenaline roaring through him. He saw Keene dragging a wounded soldier behind a rock, bullets snapping inches from her head. Brooks laid down fire, fearless in the storm. "Mark!" Morales shouted. They surged right, firing as they moved. Riley's world narrowed to muzzle flashes, dust, the rhythm of squeeze-release, squeeze-release. A figure appeared above him, RPG on his shoulder. Riley reacted without thinking, firing. The man collapsed, the rocket skittering harmlessly into the rocks. His stomach lurched, bile rising, but there was no time to think. He kept moving. They clawed their way out of the kill box, dragging wounded, returning fire until finally the ridge went quiet. The silence was crushing. 3 soldiers were down. 2 wounded, 1 gone. Riley knelt beside the body bag later, sweat and dust streaking his face, throat tight. He didn't know the man well, just shared a few jokes in the chow hall, but it didn't matter. He was part of them. And now he was gone. That night no one laughed. The chow hall was quiet, spoons scraping metal trays, eyes down. Keene sat across from Riley, lighting another cigarette. She blew smoke slowly. "You're thinking it's never going to end." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She tapped ash into a tray. "You're right. It doesn't end. Not out here. But you keep moving anyway. Because the second you stop, you're already done." Her words sank into him like stone. Later, lying awake, Riley realized something. The war wasn't just changing him anymore. It was shaping him. Every decision, every scar, every loss. Piece by piece, it was forging him into someone he didn't recognize. And he wasn't sure if that was survival, or something else entirely. The desert night clung to them like a damp cloth, though the air was bone-dry and cold. Sergeant Ramirez moved in the lead, his M4 pressed tight against his shoulder, every sense alive. Behind him, Torres muttered prayers in Spanish under his breath, the rhythm broken only by the crunch of boots against gravel. Collins carried the radio, his face pale and drawn. He hadn't cracked a joke in hours. War had finally pressed its palm hard against his chest, and he was struggling to breathe beneath the weight. Harper was in the middle of the column, eyes scanning, mind already calculating. He knew the mission had changed. The map burned in his memory showed an insurgent compound nestled beyond the ridgeline, and command wanted proof. But Harper couldn't shake the memory of the convoy burning earlier, the screams, the stench of charred uniforms. He carried the sounds with him even now, like ghosts riding on his shoulders. "We're coming up on the ridge," Ramirez whispered, his voice low, clipped. "Copy," Harper replied. He touched his side, feeling the scars through his gear, hard ridges beneath fabric. Memories threatened to pull him under, shrapnel, a fireball, the sound of bones breaking. But he forced them down. He couldn't afford to drown in the past. When they crested the ridge, the compound revealed itself like a scar cut into the desert floor. A cluster of low mud brick structures surrounded by a crude wall. Faint orange light flickered from within, lanterns, fire pits. Shadows moved. Men with rifles. Collins lifted his NVGs. "I count at least 10 outside, maybe more inside." "Too many for us," Torres muttered, shaking his head. Harper crouched, eyes narrowing. "We're not here to take them head-on. We need eyes inside, proof of weapon storage. Ramirez, take Torres and circle east. Collins, you're with me. We'll find a way closer. No one fires unless I say. We're ghosts tonight." Ramirez gave a nod, and in seconds the team split like water flowing around stone. Harper and Collins moved low, hugging the sand, hearts thumping in unison. A dog barked inside the compound, the sound echoing like an alarm bell. Collins stiffened, sweat dripping down his temple. Harper gave him a quick signal to keep moving. They reached a patch of crumbled wall, just outside the compound's edge. Harper leaned into it, ears straining. He heard laughter inside, guttural voices, the metallic clink of something heavy being moved. Weapons. Maybe crates. Collins's lips twitched. "Want me to sneak a look?" "Stay down," Harper ordered. He picked up a fragment of rock and tossed it lightly to the side. A guard's shadow shifted toward the noise, rifle raised. Harper waited until the man's boots passed within arm's reach, then lunged. One arm locked around the guard's throat, the other hand covering his mouth. The man struggled, but Harper's grip was steel, his scars burning as he choked the life from him. Seconds stretched like hours until the body went limp. Collins swallowed hard, eyes wide. "Jesus." Harper's voice was low, almost a growl. "Get used to it." They dragged the body into the shadows, covering it with sand. Then Harper pointed to a narrow gap in the wall. They slithered through, hearts pounding. Inside, the compound smelled of sweat, oil, and smoke. Men gathered around a table where maps and rifles were spread. A larger man barked orders, his voice sharp and commanding. Harper knew instantly. This wasn't just a stash. This was a hub. Plans, weapons, coordination. And if command got proof, the compound wouldn't exist by dawn. But then he froze. A small sound reached him from one of the side huts. Not weapons, not men. A child's sob. He glanced at Collins. The younger soldier's face paled even further. "Sir." Harper pressed a finger to his lips. His mind spun. If there were civilians, if there were families being kept inside, they couldn't just call in a strike. War wasn't that simple. Decisions here carried weight that command didn't always see. Ramirez's voice hissed softly in his earpiece. "East side clear. Waiting on your call." Harper's throat tightened. He looked again toward the hut. He couldn't ignore it. He tapped Collins's shoulder. "Cover me." Crouching low, Harper crept across the courtyard, shadows licking at his boots. He reached the hut, slipped inside and froze. 3 women huddled in the corner, their eyes wide with terror, clutching children. One boy, no older than 8, bore scars along his arm, old burns twisting the skin. Their gazes met his, and he felt the weight of every scar on his own body answering back. A voice barked outside. Footsteps approached. Harper's pulse spiked. He raised a hand to his lips, signaling silence. The women obeyed, pulling the children close. He slipped behind the doorway just as a guard entered. The man barely had time to register the shadow before Harper's blade slashed across his throat, hot spray hitting the floor. The body crumpled silently. Collins appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with horror at what he'd witnessed. His voice cracked. "We can't just leave them here." Harper nodded grimly. We won't. But first we finish the mission. He keyed his radio. Ramirez, change of plan. Civilians inside. I repeat, civilians. We need options. There was a pause, then Ramirez's voice came back, steady but grim. Copy. What's your call, Sarge? Harper stared at the women and children, then toward the men at the table with their maps of destruction. The decision cut like glass. If he ordered a strike now, innocent blood would mix with guilty. If he hesitated, those maps would become bombs, ambushes, more American soldiers dead on the road. The weight of command wasn't a medal or a rank. It was this. Every scar he carried reminded him of choices like these. Finally Harper spoke. No strike. We take photos proof. Then we pull out and call it in. Air Force will hit it after we get the civilians clear. Collins exhaled in relief, but Harper wasn't done. Ramirez, Torres, start marking exits. Quiet. We're in deep here. They moved fast, Harper snapping photos with his handheld camera. Maps, rifles, crates marked with foreign insignia, evidence command would salivate over. But time wasn't on their side. One of the guards noticed the missing man. Shouts rang out. Boots thundered. The compound erupted in chaos. Go! Harper barked. He grabbed Collins by the vest, dragging him into the shadows. Bullets tore through the night, sparks dancing from the walls. Ramirez and Torres returned fire, their rifles spitting fury. Harper shoved the civilians toward the breach in the wall, urging them out. A child screamed as a bullet shattered the air inches away. Harper turned, laying down fire, his scars burning like fire across his ribs. Every breath hurt, but he didn't stop. One insurgent charged with a blade, his eyes wild. Harper met him head-on, slamming his rifle butt into the man's jaw, then driving the blade of his own knife into the chest. Hot breath, hot blood, hot rage, all swallowed in silence as the man collapsed. Move, move, move. Ramirez roared. The team fought like wolves, carving a path through shadows and gunfire. They spilled out into the desert, civilians clinging to them, bullets chasing them into the dunes. When they finally stopped, breath ragged, lungs burning, Harper counted heads. All his men. All the civilians. Alive. Collins bent over, gagging, his hands shaking. Ramirez clapped him on the shoulder. Welcome to the war, kid. But Harper stood silent, staring back at the compound, still lit with fire and movement. He knew this wasn't over. They'd stirred the nest and the swarm would come. He touched his scars again as if they might remind him who he was, why he still breathed. War demanded choices. Tonight he'd made one. Tomorrow he'd pay the price. The desert stretched out in every direction, a sea of black and silver beneath a thin moon. Harper led the way, his boots sinking in soft sand, each step pulling at his strength. The civilians stumbled behind the squad, wrapped in silence except for the ragged breathing of frightened children. Every man in the team felt the weight of what they'd done, what they'd chosen to do, and what would come next. We stirred the hornet's nest, Torres muttered, voice low as he adjusted the strap on his pack. They'll be hunting before sunrise. Ramirez nodded grimly. We've got maybe 2 hours before they're swarming the dunes. Less if they've got vehicles ready. Collins, still pale from the fight inside the compound, looked back at the small group of civilians. What about them? They won't survive out here without us. Harper didn't stop walking. His tone was steady, clipped. That's why they're with us. Our mission changed the moment we stepped into that hut. Get them to safety, then worry about the rest. But inside his chest burned. Not just from the scars, though they ached like open wounds tonight. It was the choice, saving families instead of calling fire from the sky. He knew command would tear him apart for it. Maybe even court-martial. But Harper had lived with the smell of burned children once before, and he refused to carry that ghost again. The sand crunched louder behind them. Ramirez raised a fist, and the squad dropped low in unison. Distant headlights burned against the horizon, bouncing over the ridgeline. Technical, Torres whispered. Mounted gun. Harper's pulse quickened. The insurgents were moving fast. Too fast. We need cover, Ramirez said. There's none, Collins hissed, panic edging his voice. There, Harper pointed toward a jagged line of rock jutting from the desert floor. Black silhouettes like broken teeth. Move. Now. The civilians were herded forward, feet dragging, children clinging to their mothers. The squad pushed them behind the rocks as the technical roared closer, its engine growling, headlights slicing the night. Harper could see the shadow of the gunner standing tall in the back, a heavy weapon mounted and ready. Ramirez, Torres, flank. Collins, stay with the civilians. Collins shook his head. I can fight. You will, if they break through. Right now you hold the line here. Harper's tone brooked no argument. Collins swallowed hard and nodded. Ramirez and Torres melted into the darkness, rifles at the ready. Harper pressed his cheek against the rifle stock, sighted in, and exhaled slowly. The truck drew closer, bouncing over the sand, the gunner's silhouette growing sharper. At 50 yards, Harper fired. The first shot punched through the windshield, shattering glass. The second cracked the gunner's chest. The man flailed, falling back as the heavy gun swung wildly. Ramirez's shots ripped into the driver, and the vehicle swerved violently before crashing nose first into the sand with a crunch of metal. Smoke billowed upward. Torres let out a low whistle. Hell of a shot, Sarge. Not done yet, Harper said. He motioned them forward. Together they swept the wreck, rifles aimed steady. The driver was dead, slumped against the wheel. The gunner gurgled once, then went still. But the back seat door creaked open. A survivor stumbled out, coughing, a pistol in hand. His eyes burned with rage as he raised it, only to freeze when Harper's rifle barrel met his forehead. The man spat in defiance. Harper's finger tightened on the trigger. For a long second, time froze. Ramirez's voice was quiet. Orders. Harper lowered the barrel an inch. Tie him. He'll slow them down when they find him. They bound the insurgent's hands and feet with cord, leaving him alive but helpless beside the wreck. A message and a delay. When the squad returned to the rocks, Collins's relief was visible. But Harper could feel the civilian stares. The women looked at him not with gratitude, but with the fear of a man who wielded life and death like a blade. The boy with the burn scars didn't blink. He just watched, silent as though testing Harper's soul with his gaze. They moved again before dawn painted the sky. Every step was heavier. Their canteens ran low. The children slowed them. The desert didn't care. It swallowed the weak whole. By mid-morning, Collins stumbled beside Harper. We can't keep this pace. Not with them. Harper's eyes scanned the horizon. We don't have a choice. Radio range is crap out here. If we don't hit the relay tower by nightfall, command won't know what we found, and those civilians won't matter. The insurgents will bury the compound before morning. So we're just dragging them with us into hell? Harper stopped, turning on him. His eyes were hard steel. Every decision costs something, Collins. You don't like the weight? Welcome to command. Collins looked away, shame and anger warring on his face. Ramirez clapped the kid's shoulder. He's right. Out here there's no clean choices. Just survival. By late afternoon, their shadows stretched long across the sand. Harper felt his body dragging, scars burning raw with every motion. But he forced himself forward, step after step. He couldn't let them see weakness. Not now. When they reached the relay tower, Harper felt a flicker of hope. The rusting metal skeleton loomed above the desert, its dish tilted but functional. If they could power it, they could send everything, the photos, the coordinates, the proof. Torres dropped his pack. I'll get it running. Do it fast, Harper said. They're not far behind. As Torres worked, Ramirez set perimeter security, posting Collins near the civilians. Harper climbed the base of the tower, scanning the horizon. Dust plumes rose in the distance. Trucks. At least 3. His stomach nodded. Contact in 20 minutes, maybe less, he said into the radio. Torres cursed. This thing's fried. Need time. You've got 10 minutes, Harper growled. The civilians clustered close, the children crying softly. Harper crouched in front of them, trying to soften his tone. When the shooting starts, stay low. Don't move unless I tell you. The women nodded, fear wide in their eyes. The boy stared at Harper's scars again, silent, unblinking. Gunfire cracked in the distance. Ramirez's voice came sharp. Scouts. 2 down, but they know we're here. Harper snapped his rifle into place. The dust plumes grew larger. Engines roared. The insurgents were coming in force. Torres. Almost there. The first technical appeared, mounted gun spitting fire. Bullets chewed the sand around them. Harper dropped to a knee, sighted, and fired 3 clean shots. The gunner folded, dropping like a rag doll. Ramirez lit up the driver and the truck swerved, smashing into the dunes. But more came. Trucks spilling with men. Shadows racing across the desert like wolves. Collins fired wildly, panic edging his aim. Harper grabbed his vest, yanking him back behind cover. Control your breathing. Aim then fire. You panic, you're dead. Collins nodded, forcing his hands steady. The next burst of shots was cleaner and one insurgent fell. Got it? Torres shouted. The tower hummed, lights flickering alive. Send it all, Harper ordered. Coordinates, photos, everything. Torres typed furiously, signals bouncing. Uploading. The fight grew closer. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks. Ramirez cursed as shrapnel clipped his arm, blood streaking his sleeve. Harper moved in, covering him, every shot measured, precise. He felt the burn of his own scars screaming, but he pressed harder. Finally Torres shouted, "It's sent." "Then we move." Harper barked. He grabbed Ramirez, slinging the man's arm over his shoulder. "Collins, take point with the civilians." They fought their way back from the tower, the desert a storm of fire and lead. One woman stumbled, a bullet grazing her leg. Collins hauled her up, eyes blazing with fury instead of fear. He fired back, dropping another insurgent. The boy screamed as a round snapped the air above his head. Harper threw himself over the child, shielding him, his scars tearing open in memory and pain. But when he rose, the boy's eyes were different, not fear but something closer to trust. They reached another ridge, tumbling into cover. Behind them the tower burned. The insurgents raged, chasing them still. Harper gasped for breath, sweat and blood mixing. "Command has it now. Airstrike'll come. We just have to hold out long enough." Ramirez chuckled darkly, wincing at his wound. "Long enough, feels like forever." Collins reloaded, face hard. "Then forever's what they'll get." Harper stared out at the enemy pouring across the desert, his scars burning hotter than ever. This was the price of his choice. And he would pay it, one bullet at a time. The desert smelled of smoke and cordite, the air thick with the residue of gunfire. Harper pressed his back against the rocks, his chest heaving, ribs aching where old scars throbbed like raw fire. His men crouched close, reloading, bleeding, holding the line as shadows moved across the sand. The insurgents weren't stopping. Trucks, motorcycles, scattered groups of men with rifles. They poured toward the ridge like a tide. The evidence had been sent, the tower destroyed behind them, but now they were stranded in the middle of nowhere with civilians, dwindling ammunition, and the entire enemy force bearing down. Ramirez grunted, clutching his bleeding arm as he jammed a fresh mag into his rifle. "If that airstrike doesn't get here soon, we're toast." Collins wiped sweat from his brow, his face smeared with grit. "What if it doesn't come at all? What if command thinks we're expendable?" Torres barked a laugh, bitter as sandpaper. "Then we die in the desert like every other ghost who thought war gave a damn." Harper silenced them with a glare. "We're not dead yet. Eyes up. We hold until the strike." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. He'd disobeyed protocol, spared civilians, changed the mission. Would command reward that, or leave them to rot as punishment? The boy with the scarred arm crouched near Harper, staring at him the way only children can, eyes too old, too knowing. Harper met the gaze and for a moment he felt something steadying inside him. A reminder of why he'd chosen the harder path. Engines roared closer. Ramirez leaned out, fired 2 shots, then ducked back as bullets chipped stone above his head. "They're flanking us left." Harper spun, signaling Torres to shift. Collins crawled toward the civilians, shouting over the gunfire. "Stay down. Don't move." The women pulled the children tight, tears streaking through the dust on their faces. One whispered prayers in a tongue Harper didn't understand. The first technical crested the ridge. The mounted gun spat flame, tearing the rocks apart. Collins screamed as shrapnel grazed his helmet, knocking him backward. Harper rose to a crouch, squeezed off a burst and the gunner dropped, tumbling lifeless into the sand. The truck veered but more followed. Grenades arced through the night. The explosions rocked the ridge, throwing sand and rock into the air. Harper hit the ground hard, ears ringing, lungs choking. He rolled, coughed, forced himself up and returned fire. Ramirez was bleeding heavier now, face pale, but he didn't stop shooting. Torres shouted, "We can't hold much longer." Harper's voice was raw, ripped from his throat. "We hold until the sky burns. That's the mission now." Minutes dragged like hours. Every shot mattered. Every decision was life or death. Collins steadied himself, his panic burned away, his aim truer with each burst. He shouted with defiance now, fury fueling him. Then Harper heard it. The low, distant thunder of jets. He lifted his head, searching the sky. Dark shapes cut across the stars, the rumble building until the desert seemed to tremble. "Down?" Harper roared, shoving the civilians flat. The first strike hit a half-mile away, a blinding flash followed by a rolling wall of fire. The ground shook. Trucks and men vanished in the blast, swallowed whole. Another strike, closer this time, screams, fireballs, sand whipped into storms. The insurgents scattered, panic shredding their formation. Some fled back into the dunes, others fired wildly at the sky as death rained down. Harper held the boy's head down, shielding him with his own body as shockwaves hammered their ridge. When silence finally fell, it was heavier than the noise. The desert burned in patches, black smoke curling into the pale dawn. Bodies lay twisted across the sand. The survivors, few scattered, were fleeing, shadows shrinking on the horizon. Harper pushed himself up, ears ringing, chest raw. His squad was still breathing. Ramirez slumped against the rock, blood soaking his sleeve, but he was alive. Torres exhaled, whispering, "Holy hell!" Collins just stared at the devastation, his rifle slack in his hands. The civilians huddled together, whispering, crying, alive. Harper scanned them, counted heads, then let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They had survived. For now. But Harper knew survival was only half the war. The harder part was coming. Command would question every choice. Why he hadn't ordered the strike on the compound, why he'd risked his men for civilians. His career might be over. Hell, his freedom might be over. And yet, as he looked at the boy, the one who hadn't cried, the one who stared at him with those unblinking eyes, Harper felt something steadier than fear. The scars on his chest, his ribs, his arms, they didn't ache with shame tonight. They burned with purpose. Ramirez groaned, breaking the silence. "So what now, Sarge? We just sit here and wait for pickup?" Harper adjusted his grip on the rifle, scanning the smoking horizon. "No. We move. Command might know where we are, but I'm not leaving our fate in anyone else's hands." Torres raised a brow. "You think there's more out there? After all that?" Harper's voice was low, steady. "There's always more out there." Collins finally found his voice. "Do you think Command will back you up? After what you did?" Harper didn't answer right away. He touched the scar on his ribs, the one that never let him forget the last time he'd followed orders without question. Then he looked at Collins, eyes cold but clear. "Doesn't matter. What matters is we did the right thing." Collins swallowed, nodded slowly. He glanced at the civilians, then back at Harper. "Yeah, we did." The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of smoke and char. The sun climbed higher, lighting the battlefield in merciless clarity. Dead men, twisted steel, and the fragile survivors clinging to life in the middle of it all. Harper turned to his squad, to the civilians, to the horizon. "Pack what you can carry. We're heading west. Extraction or not, we move." They gathered what little they had left, canteens nearly empty, ammo dangerously low. Ramirez leaned heavy on Torres, but refused to be carried. Collins kept close to the civilians, jaw tight, rifle ready. As they started across the dunes, the boy fell into step beside Harper. He didn't speak, didn't look up, just walked with him. Harper glanced down once, then forward again. The boy's scar matched his own in ways words couldn't explain. The desert stretched endless ahead of them. Behind, the smoke rose like a signal fire, promising more war to come. And Harper knew this was far from over. War never ended with a single battle. It carried forward, scar to scar, choice to choice. He adjusted his pack, gripped his rifle tighter, and kept moving into the burning horizon. The end.